Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
And welcome once again to Faith on Trial. We examine the influence of law and society on people of faith. I'm Deacon Mike Mano, your host, and I'm here with Gina No, our lovely and talented co-host.
Good morning, Deacon Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
That's great. Lots in the news again this week. We got a debate coming up in the upcoming week, so that made the news. The Supreme Court has been working on some things. So what do we got for the show today?
Well, we're going to talk to Brian Gonzalez, who is the Development Director for Intervisions. He's going to be with us here in just a minute. Actually, he's already here now, but we're just going to invite him in and put him on the spot.
We'll give him a microphone here.
We'll give him a microphone and ask him a bunch of embarrassing questions.
Yeah, there's been a lot of law changes and court cases here in Iowa in the last 2-3 years that affect how they do business over at Intervisions.
And that's what we're here for.
That's right.
Talk about those things. Talk about what Intervisions is. There may be people out there that don't know what Intervisions is.
Well, just know they save lives.
And we will tell them. And then we have Dr. Ingrid Scope, who is the Director of Medical Affairs at the Charlotte Lesueur Institute. And she's going to talk about there's rumors going around and there are statements being made in the press that somehow because of the pro-life turn of the Supreme Court that hospitals are going to be defunded or hospitals are going to go out of business and doctors aren't going to want to go to certain states because they're pro-life or whatever. They've got a report that kind of debunks all of that. We'll talk to her about that too.
Well, that's very interesting because I think just in the news this week, the Newton Medical Center reported that they're closing their obstetrics department. So Jasper County will no longer have. So
they're closing those things, but it's not always for the reasons that they're accusing them of.
Right. And interesting that the article in our liberal newspaper here in Iowa did not actually say why that department was closing. They didn't talk about the effects of it. They only talked about the effects of it. They did interview some Democrat legislators who were happy enough to blame it on the heartbeat legislation. Sure. So it'll be good to...
But know why. No, who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Did not interview any of the doctors to determine why that isn't happening. Yeah. I would probably guess there has something to do with the medical malpractice insurance, but maybe Dr. Scope will be able to help us understand that.
Well,
better.
She covers part of that in her report, and I'm sure she'll be up on that. All right. Do we have a prayer to open us up with?
I do. I have a prayer for peace today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of peace, bring your peace into our violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn to your way of love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Gina. And we will be right back with Brian Gonzalez after these messages. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we have with us right now Brian Gonzalez, who is the Director of Development at Intervisions Health Clinic, right next door to us, actually. So, Brian, welcome to the program today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Certainly. And let's start off with something very, very simple. What is Intervisions? There are people out there that may not know what Intervisions is, so why don't you tell us?
Yeah, no, I first of all, just, thanks for inviting us and me as a representative of Intervisions. Deacon Mike, you have a long history with Intervisions. You were there at Ground Zero,
right?
The founding of Intervisions in 2011. So thank you for your support at the very beginning to help get it going. I'm sure it's very special for you to see, 13 years later, that the clinic is still going strong and helping lots of women.
Every time I go into the chapel here, we have a built-in chapel in
Yeah.
the studios. I think of that because that used to be our conference room.
That's right.
That's where the board met in there every
Yeah.
month. Yeah.
And it was a beautiful boardroom, but it's an even beautiful chapel, more beautiful chapel.
Yes,
So.
yes.
So Intervisions Healthcare, founded in 2011. I would say that if we were to say, like, what are 3 verbs that describe what we do? I would say that the 3 verbs that we could best use are educate, empower, and encourage.
Okay.
And so who do we educate? We educate pregnant women who are most at risk for abortion, and we're empowering them through medical information, through the ultrasound, to make a life-affirming choice. And then we're encouraging them through the rest of their pregnancy, and even beyond, to the extent that they're willing to let us walk that journey with them. And so in the 13 years I mentioned earlier that we've been around for 13 years, the original location is in West Des Moines. And in 2019, so in about a month or so, we'll be celebrating our 5-year anniversary of the opening of the South Clinic. But in those 13 years, almost 2,100 at-risk and abortion-minded moms who've come to us have changed their minds and have made life-affirming choices, either for parenting or placing their child for an adoption.
I want to
Praise
mention
God.
something. You mentioned the ultrasound.
Yeah.
Okay. Big thank to the Knights of Columbus for
Amen.
that, because we sweated over that when we were opening, and the Knights of Columbus came through for us and got us that initial ultrasound machine.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Ultrasound technology really changes pretty quickly. And so I think we've had 5 or 6 different ultrasounds over the years. And the Knights continue. They've given us 2 or 3 ultrasounds. And there's a Christian group called Focus on the Family that has a similar type of grant. The Knights of Columbus is a 50-50 match with local Knights and Supreme. The Focus on the Family group does an 80-20. So Focus on the Family pitches in 80%, and then Intervisions has to do the other 20%. And what I love about that is it really demonstrates how the pro-life community is truly, well, it's truly Catholic, because Catholic means universal.
Universal.
Right? But both Christians of all different walks of life coming together to support the work that we do at Intervisions Healthcare.
Now, speaking of supporting the work you do, one of the things you have coming up, and let's mention that real quick.
Sure.
You've got a dinner dance coming up.
So because we don't charge our patients, we don't take insurance, and we don't receive state and federal grant money, there's always been a need for broad community support. And so our gala is probably an event that many people are familiar with. That's usually late spring, early summer. But we've also been doing a Knights of Columbus dinner dance, where area Knights of Columbus councils come together. So typically we have anywhere from 10 to 15 councils that come to the event, and then basically it's a benefit for Intervisions. And so that'll be on Saturday, September 21st. We've gotten into a habit of alternating the location, so we kind of pick different churches and things like that. This year it'll be in Indianola at St. Thomas Aquinas.
Okay.
So if you want to attend 4:30 Mass and then afterwards come to the event. It's a registered event, a ticketed event, so it's helpful if we know ahead of time that you're coming. So if you are interested and you're listening to this now, visit our website is the easiest way to get more information about that, ivhcare.org. ivhcare.org. Click on the dinner dance information, and so Saturday, September 21st, probably about 5:30 is usually when the vigil mass ends, and then that's kind of when we get things kicked off. Litterdale out in Carroll, Iowa, will be catering the event. So it'll be a catered event, and then there'll be some dancing. There'll be some auctions. We've in the last couple of years we've had a habit of auctioning off desserts. So we have about 12 desserts that people are bringing, and we'll auction those off. Including,
And so you can literally take them home with you.
Well, you eat them you could.
Oh,
but in
you see,
theory, you're eating them there
with your table.
Yeah, your
Okay.
table. Yeah,
In
table
front
or
of
tables.
everybody.
In front of everybody. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, and so the
I like that. I love desserts.
Pleasant Hill Fairway, the baker there has won the Iowa the the fair, the state fair, the contest, the bake.
He's like a blue ribbon baker.
Yeah, but like 5 years in a row, and every year they donate. She makes, I think she makes a cake for Intervisions for this event. So that will be one of the cakes that is auctioned off as well, which is kind of neat.
And you can win that and then share it with your table.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
that's good.
It might be difficult to bring that one home. It kind of looks like a wedding cake sometimes, so you'd have to put it in your car. But so I think that's it's helpful to have these events. It raises community awareness about the work that we do at Intervisions, and then there's the financial component to support what we do. And so, if anybody else has, maybe they can't attend the dinner dance, but they'd want to learn about volunteering, or maybe they want to be a monthly donor or something like that. ivhcare.org is our website, and then they can learn more about ways to get involved.
I remember when we were starting this whole thing, it was an easy tap for money because this is a place where the rubber hits the road. We're not talking theoretics. We're not talking
Law.
morality. We're not talking law
Yeah.
or politics. We're talking about helping people who are in a crisis situation right now.
Yeah.
And so I hope people will open up their pocketbooks and
Yeah, and
whatever spare change you might have.
That's right,
for good
yeah.
people to give it to.
And I don't know if it's necessarily still easy, but I will say that our emphasis has remained outside of the morality and the politics and all of that stuff, and we've kept it. And you can see this when you. I mean, even our gala speakers, we're not inviting politicians to come, and it's not a place to try to advocate various political positions or anything like that. We like to have speakers who have personal stories about abortion. Either they were a victim of abortion, or they started the abortion and reversed it, or they found themselves with an unplanned pregnancy or something like that. And,
well, that always helps debunk the myths.
Yeah.
When the real life stories come to life, I think that helps educate all of us about
Right.
how important it is to help people understand the value of life from conception. So that's good. I'm glad that you do share those stories.
Absolutely.
What is going on now with Intervisions and all the new laws and the after the Dobbs decision and now the heartbeat law and everything else?
I was looking for a quick story
Oh,
that I wanted to
Bert.
share. So that's a great segue though, because I want to talk about I guess Dobbs was almost 3 years ago now, and then the effect that's had on the heartbeat bill and then Intervisions. But just a real quick story. Speaking of 3 years ago, we had a patient who came through our doors, and she had already started the abortion pill. Elsewhere, we don't do the abortion pill, but we do provide the abortion pill reversal. It's funny, we've been doing this for 5 years now, and people say, really, you can reverse the abortion? It's like, yeah, we've been doing it for 5 years, and we've been telling people, and people still don't know. So that's why I always think it's important to, in these contexts, to share with people that the first pill, mifepristone, is a progesterone blocker, and so we have a procedure, a therapy, where you can override the harmful effects of the progesterone blocker by providing progesterone hormonal supplementation.
Just don't take the second pill.
That's right.
You got
right.
2 pills.
Right.
Yeah.
There are 2 pills, and if the patient takes the second one, it's really hard for us to reverse that. But this woman had a successful reversal, and out of the blue, she reached out to us. So there are times we do follow up to our patients, and then they provide us with information. But this was just like on a random Tuesday morning, and she just sent us an email. And so I want to share this with you. So this is from a woman who came to us 3 years ago. I'm not sure if the same people work at Intervisions when I was helped, but wanted to send over my gratitude. I'm forever thankful for the help this company and community provided me when I was struggling in the hardest part of my life. My son is 2.5 years old now, and I'm in college full-time majoring in psychology. I just finished my first year with all A's. I took summer break off. I've moved out of my own 3-bedroom apartment so my son can have his very own room. I've had the same job since January of 23, and it's going well, though I'm excited to start my career and get a different job down the road in my field of study.
Wow.
So when you think about the generational impact of the work that our nursing staff is doing at Intervisions, the work that you started 13 years ago, it is so critical because lives are being saved. But think of the impact that this daughter, I think it might be a son, the woman, right, the mom and the son are going to have in the world and the community at large. So that might be a nice segue into the heartbeat bill.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, people have asked me several times, if and when I stand in front of the throne and have to answer questions, what am I going to say? And I tell them I'm going to point to InterVisions.
Good.
And I'm going to talk about babies that were saved. And that's it.
Yes.
There ain't no more.
Right. Well, and it's hard to put, I just threw out a number, right? 2,100 moms who've made a life-affirming choice in the past 13 years. We could try to get little paragraphs from each one of them, but that's really hard for us to do. But it's really nice to be able to have something like that, to be able to share with people who, like you both, have been involved from the very beginning, either as board members or volunteers or financial contributors, and as people who are praying for the clinic. So the heartbeat bill.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So for many of you who know, there were 2 attempts to get it passed, 2 successful attempts of getting it enshrined in law. And it was, but it was because of an injunction. Basically, the injunction was removed. I'm not a legal scholar, by the way, so you legal scholars can correct me. But
I'm not much of a legal scholar. That's why I'm on the radio.
That's right. So the injunction was officially removed through the judicial process because it made its way to the Iowa Supreme Court. And that went into effect at the end of July. So we're, early September. So we're about 5 weeks after the heartbeat bill is enforceable in the state of Iowa. Now, people say, great, no more abortions in Iowa. Well, let's take a look at what the law actually says. This law applies to a provider of abortion. So it's, people say, well, how is InterVisions going to be affected by it? Well, technically, it doesn't apply to us because we don't provide abortions. If you provide abortions, you have to provide an ultrasound with an abdominal probe, so an abdominal ultrasound to a patient. And if there is fetal heartbeat activity, then you can't have an abortion. If there's no fetal heartbeat activity, then they sign a piece of paper. The doctor signs a document saying, vouch that there's no fetal heartbeat activity, and then they can have an abortion. So the question then becomes, at like what stage and gestational age that's the case. I would say that the law is mostly an 8 to 10 week abortion ban and not really a 6 week abortion ban, because the law stipulates that it's an abdominal ultrasound and not a transvaginal. We tend to do transvaginal because 80% of our patients, 75% of our pregnant patients come to us so early in their pregnancy, before 7 weeks, that a transvaginal ultrasound shows far more information that's really helpful for this woman who finds herself in a tough situation. And that information is helpful for her in making that life-affirming choice. Whereas if we were to do an abdominal ultrasound on a 4-week pregnancy, we're not going to see as much. Mm-hmm. So I think the law was intentionally written that way for political reasons. So that's where we are right now with the law. And how it's affected InterVisions on a very practical level. We get terrified and scared patients calling us every single day. They know that there's a law change. They don't want to get in trouble. And to be clear, the law criminalizes the doctor, the provider, and not the mom. And so we're just trying to help her understand that she's not the one that's going to be at fault. But I'll say this, the goalposts keep moving in our world, in our in the pregnancy help world, because what we see now is abortion tourism is on the rise, and abortion pills. And so you can go online and buy abortion pills. Essentially anybody can. You can identify as Deacon Mike can identify as a 25-year-old pregnant woman and get pills. And those come in.
I was a 25-year-old pregnant woman at one time. Yeah,
that was last week.
That was last week. Yeah.
So you and those are coming from out of the country. So that's why it's hard to legislate that and enforce that. And then abortion tourism, you can go to Minnesota, you can go to Illinois. And so those are things that we know. And so now we've modified our scripting to be able to address those things.
And you talk about that abortion tourism, and I want to let our listeners know that isn't the pregnant girl or mom getting in her car and driving to those states. Literally, Planned Parenthood is providing those transportation services. That's something new that we haven't seen before.
Right.
That's abhorrent to me, but that's how it's being operated.
Yeah, and so because Planned Parenthood operates in sort of there are like 5 different states in the Northwest. I forget what they're called. Planned Parenthood of the Heartland, I think, was what it used to be called, but it's a different name now. And so you've got your Minnesota, Iowa, Dakotas. That's how they're able to work together. Planned Parenthood's able to work together to get to transport these patients and offer. And even employers are offering transportation to take people,
That's true
right?
too.
I mean, that they're willing to pay for that. So
and reimburse for hotels and all the rest.
It's such a bizarre world that we live in
is.
post-Dobbs that this was the unintended consequence of such a wonderful pro-life victory at the Supreme Court level that now we have 50 different battles at 50 different states and things like that. So,
and this is where education comes in to play, changing the hearts and minds of people, opening their eyes to the reality of abortion.
That's right, yeah. And our approach at Intervisions has been for years to go talk to the Maggie DeWitties of the world and say, go do the best you can on a lobbying, and we're going to have to deal with the aftermath and what the pregnant woman feels, and that sometimes it's unpredictable, and so I would say the cases that we've seen in the past probably 2 or 3 months have been among the most difficult in our history, but that's just the way. God's going to equip us to be able to handle that.
That's great attitude. Have you seen an uptick then in the last 3 months since the heartbeat bill went into effect?
Yeah, the challenge with that is that August and September tend to be slower months for us anyway.
All right.
Historically, the last 6-7 years, August and September are slower months. And so that has continued this year, but we don't know if that's attributed to the heartbeat bill or if it's seasonal. So I'll join you again in November, December, and we'll see if those numbers, if there's an uptick. But,
or in a year, and you can tell us how it went. Yeah.
And I think part of it, too, is we just have to continually reach out and be proactive in our marketing efforts to be able to reach the word I've been using over the last couple of years is to intercept these patients before they drive to Minnesota or Illinois, before they buy that abortion pill, and let them know that we care about them. We want to help them.
Well, that there's an option. And
Right.
It's not just care in the pregnancy, it's care beyond the pregnancy.
Right.
I imagine you collaborate with a lot of the other programs in the Des Moines metro area that help women in crisis pregnancies.
Absolutely. So the agencies that are in central Iowa are critical in our ability to do what we do, so that we're able to identify some of these obstacles on why she feels like abortion is her only option. And then we're able to plug these women in with these other agencies in the community.
You know, I've never actually worked at Intervisions. I've never spoken to these women over there. As a matter of fact, I deliberately kept away when I was on the board and everything, because coming in wearing clerics isn't, that's going to scare people. But I've dealt with a lot of women that have had abortions, and I hear the same things over and over again, that they regret what they did. And if they would have known something more, they might have made a different decision. And I've also talked to some who have been in the chair or wherever it is they put them in the abortion clinics and asked to leave, and they wouldn't let them go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like their business is to kill, not to save people, not to help people, but to kill that little fetus one way or another.
Yeah.
And that's how they get paid. But I think it's the regret that I hear the most.
Yeah.
Is the regret. I'm sorry about that. My little girl would have been so many years old now. Yeah.
I think the fact that we don't have a vested financial interest in the outcome really gives us that objective ability that the other side can't say that the same.
Well, when people come in, it's a non-judgmental meeting. You're not making judgments over them. You're just, Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am.
Yep.
You got everything you need, and no judgment, just telling you what it is.
It's funny you mentioned about the cleric. So we had a meeting with a priest, probably for like a baby bottle campaign or something like that. So we're about to enter baby bottle campaign season. So if Intervisions, you see a baby bottle campaign, take a bottle home, fill it with change, cash, and checks, and bring it back the next week. But we had a priest coming in the other day, a couple weeks ago, and a patient was sitting there in the waiting room. She saw the priest walking in, and she turned to the receptionist and said, "I don't have to speak to a priest, do I?" So to your point, right? I mean,
that's why I stayed away.
He was wearing a cleric and his clerics, and he didn't mean anything by it. He had a meeting, and
The only time I ever came in was for the board meeting.
Right. In the evening,
and phone. We did, phone stuff. But, I was very conscious of that. Yeah.
Is Intervisions doing anything in particular to combat this new trend in the chemical abortions, mail order chemical abortions? Is there some advertising program or marketing program that can find these women and let them know there's an alternative?
So I would say the what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our patients and what we're seeing online and things like that are advertisements from it's mostly big pharma, right, who's selling these pills. Stock up on your abortion pills so that when you get pregnant, then you'll have your pills. So it isn't even like I'm pregnant, then I'm going to get my pills, but rather go buy the pills ahead of time so that when you get pregnant, you already have a stockpile. And so that's knowing that that's the case, we're trying to be proactive in helping to educate at least the pregnant women who come in about the effects, the deleterious effects of the abortion pill and things like that.
Okay.
We'd like to keep this going, but we're pretty much out of time right now, Brian.
Okay.
So I want to thank you for coming.
I thought you said you were going to ask me some embarrassing questions.
I'll ask you that when we turn off the microphone.
Okay, sounds good.
All the things we talked about before we went on the air, we'll go into detail on that one.
Perfect.
Yeah,
sounds
we get
great.
off the air.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming in. Yeah. Thank you for coming in. It's Brian Gonzalez, who is the Director of Marketing or Director of
Just development.
For Intervisions, which is right next door to us here. Thank you for coming. And how can people get a hold of you again? What is the website?
Yeah, visit our donor website, ivhcare.org.
And if you've got some spare change, it's a great place to put it. Good. Brian, thank you very much. And we will be right back after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we have right now with us Dr. Ingrid Scope, who is the Director of Medical Affairs at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. So maybe we can start off with explaining to our listeners what the Charlotte Lozier Institute is and what you do there.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. And the Charlotte Lozier Institute at lozierinstitute.org is a think tank that is dedicated to science and statistics on life issues. And it turns out, when you look at the science, when you look at the peer-reviewed literature, you find a lot of data that does demonstrate that the pro-life position is better for women, it is safer for women, and science does support a pro-life position. So we're honored to be able to get that information together so that people can justify to their friends why they're pro-life.
Okay. You were author, I think, of a report that was done recently, and it was about the hospital closings and doctors leaving the practice because of pro-life laws and things like that. And we just had, as Gina was telling you before we went on the air, a hospital obstetrics unit closed recently in the central Iowa area, and a lot of people are saying it's because of our heartbeat law and things like that. So let's disabuse that if it can be disabused so that people know what's really going on here.
Yes, it absolutely can be proven false. And this really comes in the wake of, after the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, we've seen a fear-mongering narrative from so many of the pro-abortion medical organizations. They say that doctors can't treat medical emergencies in pregnancy. That's absolutely false. Every single state law allows a doctor to do what he needs to do when a woman experiences an emergency in pregnancy. And secondarily, as you mentioned, there's now a narrative that doctors are not going to go to pro-life states, or they're going to leave pro-life states, and that this will worsen the issue of maternity care deserts. Well, one thing to understand is maternity care deserts are a long-standing problem. This is not anything new that happened in the wake of Dobbs. This has been a decades-long problem. And part of the reason for this is that America is experiencing a dearth of birth. Fertility rate is below replacement right now. So fewer and fewer women are giving birth to babies. And what happens in rural areas is that if a hospital has less than one delivery a day, for example, they still have to keep the staffing levels to maintain a safe environment. And this is not financially feasible for some of these hospitals that have very few deliveries. And so what is happening, and by the way, the closures that happened in 2023, there were just as many hospital closures in pro-abortion states as there were in pro-life states. So it's absolutely false to point and to say this is because of the pro-life laws. It's because not enough babies are being born, and in many cases, these hospitals are financially insolvent. So that, I mean, there's solutions to that problem, but it is absolutely false to say that this has anything to do with the pro-life laws. Of course, laws protecting unborn life are going to allow more babies to be born, which will allow obstetric units to improve their financial situation, in addition to, of course, the beauty that comes with every new human life that enters the world and the benefits to family and society for that.
We just had on with us, before we got you on, our first guest was the development director for InterVision's health clinic, which is a pro-life pregnancy center here in Des Moines. And he was talking about some of these same things, about what it is that we're doing in the pro-life game, I guess, pro-life organizations, and how that's affecting society. But it seems now like what we're hearing is that every time something comes up that we don't like, it gets blamed on pro-life people. The hospitals are closing because of pro-life people. Doctors are leaving the practice because of pro-life people. But I think with the longevity you have in this study, you've seen that this has been happening for quite some time, especially in rural areas.
Yes, it's a long-standing problem. And also, it should be pointed out that approximately 90% of obstetricians do not perform elective abortions. So it is not really a part of most obstetricians' practice, but unfortunately we have very vocal pro-abortion medical organizations like the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology that are trying to make the point that abortion is necessary health care, that doctors do need to do this procedure. And we have written at LozierInstitute.org on both that issue and also, as we're discussing today, we have a brand new paper addressing the real data behind why are hospitals closing, and also this narrative that doctors aren't going to work in pro-life states. Again, that's false. What we see is that more medical students than ever are training in pro-life states. More obstetricians than ever are doing their obstetric residency training in pro-life states. So it is false to say that doctors aren't going to those states because of the law. And again, most obstetricians love to deliver babies. That's why they go into the profession that they do.
Now, what about the training in medical schools? Aren't there some schools that require compulsory training on how to do an abortion, how to perform abortions?
There are certainly efforts underway to force every resident to perform abortions during their training, but fortunately we do still have conscience protection laws in our country. So students or residents don't have to do the abortion, but of course, as you might imagine, there's a lot of peer pressure for them to do abortion, so it is hard for them to say no. But disingenuously, they're sometimes making the argument that doctors need to train to do particularly like later abortions, dilation and evacuation, dismemberment abortions, in order to have the surgical skills to care for a woman who has a late miscarriage. Can you imagine in any other branch of medicine where we said, we actually need to train to kill in order to protect people in emergencies? The reality is every procedure that is used to perform an abortion can be used to remove a baby that tragically has died. And so even if these programs are not doing elective abortions, the residents do get training because tragically this does happen. And so they will obtain those skills. Additionally, other ways to train them can be used. Simulation and models and things like that can be used. So it's not necessary to end human life in order to train doctors.
What's unimaginable to me is how so many people in the medical profession can look at the pregnant woman and see only one patient. It's actually two.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obstetrics should have a Hippocratic view of the world. We should have a two-patient paradigm. Sometimes we do need to balance the needs of one of our patients versus the needs of the other, and that can be difficult. But we must, through the principles of beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, autonomy, we must consider that second patient. That's the beauty and sometimes the burden of obstetrics. But as you said, many of these pro-abortion organizations are making an argument that the mother is the patient, and only if she gives the doctor permission to consider her child a patient is that child's needs evaluated and cared for. And of course, we all see that is that's not what medicine's about, and this is a misuse of medicine.
Dr. Scope, for years we were hearing it well before these the Dobbs decision or these pro-life state legislations that obstetric doctors were leaving the practice due to the cost of their medical malpractice insurance and the litigation that's been forced on them because of the way they practice. How much of that do you think plays into some of these rural hospitals losing their obstetrics departments?
Well, I think that is something, again, that is a real issue, and it's something to be considered. If a doctor is practicing in an area where there are not a lot of medical resources to support his practice, he is at more risk for litigation, and that could be a factor. So what we, again, there's so many ways that we can address these issues other than pointing erroneously at abortion laws. But in that situation, medical malpractice reform, as has occurred in Texas where I practice, brings many doctors into the state. Doctors want to come to a state that has a pro-physician environment. And, of course, there's many ways we can work out transfer protocols to get women quickly to the care they need if they happen to be having an emergency in a rural location. But again, very disingenuous to say we're going to deal with the problem of maternal mortality by ending the life of the baby so that the mother doesn't carry the child to birth. I mean, obviously, as a country, we can do so much better than that. But, the 50 years of Roe v. Wade and widespread abortion has left the United States. We are the worst in terms of maternal mortality of all the developed countries. So abortion hasn't helped us, and I think there's many, you can make an argument that there's many ways in which abortion has harmed women that has made them more at risk for maternal mortality when they do carry a baby to term.
You kind of touched on it, so maybe you can draw out some more information for me on this. Are there any government programs, policies, improvements, legislation that can encourage doctors to stay in these rural areas or to provide these services to these maternal deserts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once a state recognizes we have a problem, there are many things that can be done. Again, they can focus financial resources on attracting physicians into these areas, maybe by repaying student loans or, by other financial enticements. The government of a state can say it is a priority for this state to have a labor and delivery unit in this underserved area. And, of course, the government can help those hospitals financially. There's much that can be done, and it's a very complex issue, but we certainly need to look into these issues. But to point at the pro-life law and to say that's the problem, of course, is false. But it also keeps us from looking at the real interventions that can be done to allow these facilities to continue to provide services and to continue to care for pregnant women.
Let's turn our attention back a couple of years to what we talked about when you were on last time, which was the abortion pill. What's the new status of the abortion pill, and what's going on, and what havoc is it causing?
Well, unfortunately, that situation has just gotten worse. So the Guttmacher Institute told us last year there were 630,000 abortions performed in our country with these abortion drugs. And as we talked about before, even when they're used under medical supervision, complications are frequent. It appears that between 1 out of 20 and 1 out of 25 women will go to an emergency room with a complication, even when we're using the FDA's protocol. But, as we probably discussed last time, the FDA removed all the safeguards requiring these to be supervised by a doctor. So now these drugs can be ordered through a website. They can be delivered in the mail. And so women are having these abortions completely without medical supervision. And again, going back to our concern about rural areas without health care readily available, when these women have complications, they are at very high risk to hemorrhage requiring a transfusion or even die. And yet, because our country does not keep mandatory data on abortion complications, that could happen and nobody might ever know about it. So it's just gotten worse. There was a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court that asked the Supreme Court to make the FDA do their job to supervise dangerous drugs, which they've refused to do on abortion drugs. And the Supreme Court dodged the question. They said that the doctors who were caring for these complications did not have standing to bring the lawsuit, so they essentially did not look at the merits of the issue. The good news, I think, is that there are several states that are picking this lawsuit up. And so I do believe it will go back to the Supreme Court next term. And I think that the Supreme Court needs to understand they need to provide supervision of our rogue government agencies like the FDA that are pursuing ideology rather than science and allowing women to be harmed.
Well, it's my understanding now that there are some states, California being one of them, that require that public universities and public colleges that have medical staffs there to assist the students have to be able to supply these pills. And that anecdotal evidence suggests that there are a lot of co-eds that are hemorrhaging by themselves in dorm rooms.
Yeah, these poor college students. I mean, they're told it's safer than Tylenol, yeah. And then they're in disbelief, and of course they don't want to talk about it when they hemorrhage, when they have extreme labor-like pain because these drugs essentially cause their body to go into labor, and then they see their baby in so many circumstances.
Oh, gosh.
And so that's the natural process that these abortions are being promoted to these women. We already have, as we all know, a mental health crisis in our country. Who knows how much worse it gets when these women see their fully formed child in the college dorm bathroom. So, again, it's pretty extreme. The states are attempting to protect life. The other half are going the other way. They're trying to take away any limitation at all.
Before we go, why don't you tell us how anybody who wants to find out more about what the Charlotte Lozier Institute is doing or how they can perhaps help finance it, how they can do that?
Yeah, thank you. So our website is Lozier, L-O-Z-I-E-R, institute.org, and just come and look around the website. So we've got so much information there that people really need to understand because the American been gaslighted for years on this issue. So come and look. You can support us financially. We are a nonprofit, and just spread the word about what the truth tells us.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and we certainly wish you well in your work, and we'll keep you in our prayers. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Thank you very much. And we will be right back after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back to wrap up. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. Gina, all about abortion today.
Well,
and
it's a
crisis
big
pregnancy,
issue.
yeah.
Especially leading up to the election. Although I thought I heard I think I heard originally early in the summer that was going to be the leading issue to determine, because 10 states have abortion legislation on their ballots, and that was going to be a big issue. We saw our Vice President Kamala Harris for the first time ever, Vice President be at an abortion clinic, is promoting their efforts there. But recently, I think that's kind of waned a little bit and isn't such a prevalent issue. I think it's more important that the economy is an issue in this next election.
What bothers me is there are some people that think that the highest thing that they can achieve through politics today and through the election is to be able to dismember their babies in the womb.
Yeah, that seems to be. Yeah, and a lot of people will. You still hear the mantra that it's just a clump of cells. That's and it's not. And I know that recently New York has decided who allow late term abortions as no longer going to pay for burials of those babies, and the admittance that they're doing those abortions was horrific to me, and then to not even honor the life of that child.
And this is something the doctor pointed out. These co-eds in their dorm rooms having to look at the baby when it comes. That was a clump of cells.
Well,
that's what they were told,
yeah.
And now it comes out and they see it, and it's dead, but it's got a face, it's got hands, it's got feet. It looks like a baby. You got to wonder then, they're thinking, what in the world have I done here?
Well, because their paradigm, it's a huge paradigm shift for them. They're led to believe this is a Tylenol, your headache will go away in an hour. Here's an abortion pill, your pregnancy will be gone in an hour. It just doesn't work like that. And I think that's where the trauma comes in. They're not adequately prepared for what is to happen to their body and what they will experience. So the other thing that was horrific to me is the fact that Brian pointed out that I had no idea that Big Pharma was promoting young women to get these drugs to have in their medicine cabinet, so that in the event that they ever need them, they're there and available. So that seems very wrong.
Yeah, it does. And again, it's money. Follow the money. Follow the money. You see where all this is coming from.
Well, and
a lot of it.
I think the more that we promote our doctors, our obstetricians, and give them support, I thought it was interesting that Dr. Scope said that 90% of doctors, obstetricians, will not perform abortions. So I think that there's some policy changes that we can make that help our doctors to support our young women and our mothers.
Yeah, and we have to be family supported. I mean, we have to support families out there. We're doing a lot of things politically and legislatively to kind of divide people and divide families, and that's no way to solve this problem. We've got to bring people together. We've got to support families, and we've got to recognize the importance of families in today's society.
And it makes a great country. Mm-hmm. Strong families make a great country.
That's right. And we see the result of what happens when you don't have strong families. You have kids that are don't have anybody. They're isolated. They're trapped by social media, and they like this kid that shot up the school yesterday, and others like them. There are people. If you listen really to what the experts are saying, these people are detached from family. They're detached from friends. They're detached from society, and that's generally what is, at least the initial cause for a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, we have prayers for all of them.
That's right.
Honestly.
That's right. All right. I think we are pretty much out of time now, so let's end with our Defender's Prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou into the heavenly host by the power of God. Thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who roam about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Well, that's it for this week. We will be back again with another edition of Faith on Trial next week. Until then, remember, go to church this weekend and make sure you take your kids.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial, with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.